Facebook. Don't. You should know better.
Hi, this is Dan Watanabe.
I'm Saran Fox.
This is Dan and Saran's Take on Hollywood. Beginning this week, we are introducing a new segment, and that is the pitch segment. Today, Garen Tanelian will be pitching us his project, and we will be doing our best not to make him cry.
Absolutely. But if we can, it's a win.
Exactly.
It's a win for me, too. I
Welcome,
need a good
Garen. We just want to hear you tell us a story. You know, that pitching is basically once upon a time. That's what I tell students. I heard hundreds and hundreds of pitches when I was in development, and it's basically gaining the interest of the producer or studio executive you're talking to and telling them something that if in the middle of it you are interrupted for any reason, we are super anxious to find out what happens next.
Okay.
So why don't you start?
Okay, so the log line is, after getting out of jail and owing a lot of debt to the mafia, a guy tries to track down his identical twin brother to get on a game show to be able to win $50,000 to pay off his debts.
That is awesome. And anyone who's unfamiliar with what a log line is, it's a one or two sentences that summarize what the story is.
Yeah, so like what you would do, what I would like to do with the log line is basically explain what's going on, like with the main character, his situation, say what he's got to do to get his end goal. It's a very simple.
It was an excellent log line. I am intrigued. How about you, Dan?
I'm intrigued too, but let's actually start back a little bit.
Okay.
So Garen, tell us a little bit about yourself. And what is it that made you decide to ruin your life and become a writer?
Well, I remember, I guess for a long time it was like trying to figure out what job I wanted to do that was supposed to be a real job. And I ended up finding out that I like creative writing in high school and like making short films and all that. And then at one point in the middle of my sophomore year of college, I figured out that I could take film classes, and I met you in my class because you were my professor. And when I said, oh, I want to do film, but I don't know, I want to be a writer, but I don't know, like, I feel like that could be my hobby, or I don't know if it's going to be my job. And then you told me, yeah, you could make it your job. And I said, okay. And then a couple years later, I'm here. So I'm trying to figure that out and see how that works out.
So tell us about the genre of your project.
It's a comedy. It's a comedy with hints of drama in there, like little emotional thing. But it's a very much a very screwballish kind of comedy.
It sounds like something Nicolas Cage would do 15 years ago before he ruined himself. Yeah, absolutely.
So what made you like this genre?
What made me like comedy more than anything was that, like, it had a personal impact on my life. Like growing up, like it was like being a little tubby kid, and my parents split up, and I was kind of bummed out with life. And like when I was like 6, my dad got me a little TV for my birthday, and like totally changed my life. And I watched everything, and that was when Comedy Central just started getting bigger after South Park was like hitting it off. And I was watching TV all the time, and I kept watching comedy specials, I kept watching stand-ups, and then when they started making original programming, I found South Park, I found shows like Family Guy and Futurama and all these things that came out. And
you know, philosophically, when you're laughing, you're not upset.
Yeah.
When you're laughing, you're not angry, and when you're laughing, you're not thinking about all your worries. It's joy in the moment.
Yeah.
And so that hooked you.
Yeah, it was like that's what I found out that TV was like. I know a lot of people like to say film movies were their escapism. TV was my escapism.
Yeah.
It was the way that I knew that anytime I was punked around in middle school for being fat or like being loud, or when my parents would fight over the phone and I didn't know if I was going to spend Christmas with who or what, or when in high school if a girl rejected me and I felt like crap, I knew I could watch TV and feel totally better.
And also you could hear other people laughing, and it was kind of, there's a connectedness to all of that. And also tell us, right now you're at CSUN, correct?
Yes.
That's the California State University at Northridge?
Yes.
And you're in your senior year getting your degree in?
It's cinema, television, arts with the focus of media and theory and criticism.
So do you want to teach?
I would be okay with it, but my main goal is to work as a screenwriter and get that
Awesome.
going.
Okay.
Okay, well, tell me what movie you're embarrassed to admit you love.
I'm embarrassed that I admit that I love. That's a tough one. There's a
Okay.
lot of bad movies that I really
Put
like.
that question to one side just briefly. Tell
Yes.
us, to get you into the answering the questions
Oh,
mode,
right.
can you tell us the movie that you're, one of the movies that you're most fond of, that means something to you.
Oh, hands down, I think my favorite movie of all time has to be Cool Runnings.
Okay.
I actually love that movie. To like, I could watch it if you played it right now. I could sit down and watch it, and I'll be zoned out for hours.
What's your favorite scene?
My favorite scene in the whole movie was the scene when Yul Breda and
John Candy?
Junior Bebel were in the bathroom, and after Junior got punked around by one of the Swedish dudes, I think it was Swedish or Norway, whatever, and then there was that whole speech where he kept saying, like, he's like, you have to look in the mirror and say, I see pride, I see power, I see a badass mother who won't take no crap out of nobody. And like they kept repeating it over and over again, and then he went in and they had a huge bar fight.
Yeah.
That was my favorite scene in the movie. I could laugh so hard every time I watched that.
And you know, for those of you who don't know, it's about what country are they from?
Jamaica.
They were Jamaican bobsled team, and as you know, we don't have to say there's no snow in Jamaica. And John Candy, of course, it had the awesome, fantastic John Candy, and I'm not surprised that it's your favorite movie because it's about the underdogs.
Yeah.
It's about the people doing what they're not supposed to be doing and doing their very best at it, and someone who believed in them.
Yeah.
Someone who believed very much in them.
It was really cool because like especially when you learn like the basic foundations of screenwriting or like screenwriting styles or storytelling or whatever. I remember the first time I started understanding what that was, I went back to watch that movie and it hit every beat that I thought it would. I was like, okay, this should happen right around now. It happened. This should happen right around now. It happened.
And yet it wasn't predictable. It was predictable in that sense, but it was fresh for you.
Yeah, and it made me realize why a film like that was so like it flowed. It was cohesive. It made sense. I mean, mostly made sense. But because there were like the things that I always love about it. Now that I'm an adult, I watch them like that. Like I notice continuity errors, but whatever. That's just me being picky. But I think that it's a really easy. It's one of those really funny, easy movies to watch that makes you laugh and actually does inspire you in a way, because it's a really great inspirational movie.
And it's a bit of a fish out of water movie, and he's the one guy who believes in them.
Yeah.
So it's about sports, it's about work ethic, it's about doing the impossible when people say you can't do it, and it's also a hilarious concept, Jamaican bobsled team.
Yeah.
I mean, just when somebody, it's like the snakes on a plane pitch. Okay, here's my pitch, Jamaican bobsled team at the Olympics or whatever. So I really applaud you finding that movie so inspirational. Do you think that we're ready to hear his pitch?
Yes,
now that we've
absolutely.
hopefully made you more comfortable?
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
So you heard the log line. So just imagine. So you see a guy named Ray. He gets out of jail. You find out that he worked for the mob as a strong dude, and he got into some trouble, didn't pay some gambling debts off, went to jail. Now he's out, and he's trying to figure out a way to hide from the mob, who he still owes some money. And so he sees a commercial one day at a bar for a show called Twinsies, where twins go on, and they basically play pyramid with each other, and they try to guess each other's favorite movies. What's your deep dark secret? Blah blah blah, and they write the answers. And the prize was $50,000. It would pay for his debts, and he said, "I'm going to track down my brother." He finds his twin brother in town, who's a clean cut, good dude, wife and kids, accountant, and he tries to get him to go on the show with him, but he said, "Don't get near my kids. You're crazy." And then they start to realize they still have a connection because they always have secret languages. And so they go from there. They try to train for the show. They try to remember everything they had to go. They haven't seen each other in over 10 years. And so as they start reconnecting, they go to the show and they find out that there's a bunch of other sets of twins that are also competitive and also wearing uniforms and sync everything like that. And they're just walking and looking completely different, but they're twins. Mm-hmm. Then they meet these twin girls who Ray was falling for one of them. And his brother's name is Jay, so it's really funny. That's Ray and Jay. So he falls in love with one of them, and he's trying to talk to her without revealing that he's actually a criminal. but he's also trying to get the mob away from him because the mob's trying to find out where he is, and they find him on the show, and it just becomes a whole debacle towards the end where they're at a peak moment where they're about to answer the last question. The mob just rolls in and starts shooting the place up, and they have to run away. And after figuring out what was going on, they found the money that in the briefcase that they had that was supposed to be the prize. They stole it in the end, and gives it, instead of paying his debts off, Ray decides to go back to jail and gives the money to his brother who needed it to help pay for their house. And so now the ending is that he starts to visit his brother again. 5 years later, he gets on parole, and now he gets to see his nephews and nieces, and they actually get to hang out and they get to reconcile as brothers.
That is, I really like that. And I really like this, and I'm assuming that they're identical twins.
Yeah.
It's the show you have to be an identical twin.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there is that connection between identical twins. This is very unique and very original.
Who do you see playing the lead role?
Any twins? Like, yeah, that was one of those difficult things when I was writing. I thought it was a funny idea, and it was ridiculous.
Well, do you
enough
remember
where-
Adaptation?
Yeah.
Nicolas Cage played twins, and they did it successfully.
Yeah, so I mean, I see it as being, in terms of a specific actor, I can't think of a young I would want a younger comedian who's kind of one of those up and comers to be on it, maybe an SNL caster, but preferably a comedian, someone who's good at throwing things back and forth. But the way I see it is that there's a lot of banter back and forth between them in the same room, and there's a lot of and there's a lot of action-y kind of scenes at some point. So the idea of Nicolas Cage playing two people I don't know how that would work production-wise, but that's a whole nother story. But I would see it. I would like a comedian to be that, to be in that role.
And so how old are Ray and Jay? In their mid-30s?
In their mid-30s, yeah.
Yeah. I like the idea of, that we would also follow his character, and that his character has that moment where his character changes, where he thinks of someone else first. And and also I like the idea that they haven't spoken, so there's all this having to work together, and yet there's so much friction because they're so different.
Yeah.
And that you see things almost really fall apart towards the end, and then he makes this decision that he's going to sacrifice for someone else.
Yeah.
For someone else, and it's a little bit like Groundhog Day, but it isn't a message that you beat the audience over the head with. Is that it comes organically from the progression of the relationship and what happens, and I like that very, very much. That when characters make these decisions that change their lives and the lives of others, but it's not contrived.
Yeah.
And I have a sense that you could pull it off. That it has to come from character. Has to come from character. What's your take, Dan?
What made Ray and Jay hate each other? What event caused them to hate each other?
Was
Can be brought up.
the moment of Ray going to jail where they were both young. They both grew up poor, young kids who wanted to who were in college, and Ray was, because he was just they were both bad kids, but he figured that he wasn't going to go anywhere, and because Jay was actually smarter, and that he was going to be a hotshot accountant and actually get his life straight. And he had just got his then girlfriend, now wife, pregnant, and he was like, I want to actually like make something of myself. Like, I want you to, and like, come on, like, I want you to like be there, like, let's hang out on our birthday, like, let's have a good time. And instead of being there with all their friends and family and stuff on their birthday, he was doing a job, and that's when he got caught that night.
Right.
And so he was upset that he didn't see, like, that he lied to him, and that he found out he was a criminal after all that time because he didn't know. And so they haven't spoken in such a long time, and while Ray's in jail becoming a tougher criminal, Jay ends up becoming like an accountant, like working his 9-to-5 job, just bought a new house, he's in debt, and like he's just like, with a baby and and all that stuff, and with his wife, and he's trying to figure stuff out, and
I also
he
see
becomes like a straight-laced guy.
wonderful roles for their parents. Like the mother goes to prison to visit Ray, and there's a discussion about the relationship with the brother. I do have one question. He gets caught doing something for the mob. He's like a henchman or whatever, and he's doing something for the mob and he gets caught. How did he get in debt to the mob? That's a practical question. I don't think that the reason why he was caught put him in debt.
He's
Specifically, did he have gambling debts and his boss kept loaning him money and he said, if you pull off this job, we'll cancel the debt or something like that?
I thought of that in the beginning,
Yeah.
that it was going to be like that, but I thought, okay, maybe I should try something a little bit different, which is that he was the guy who was the middleman for the money. He was always the dude that was the guy who made the trade-off and then give the money to the boss. But he was skimming off the top without telling him. And he was taking the money.
I like that.
So, because he was really good at like sleight of hand, and that was one of their things was that you find out when they were kids they love magic, and like they figured it out, and like they make that joke later where they're like they say like, man, come on, you love that magic stuff. We both love magic. And it's like, yeah, that's why it got us beat up as kids, is because we were like little nerds. And so, but that's why he was really good at sleight of hand. And then you find out later in the movie when I said how he stole the money from the show, that's how he did it. He figured out which one is the right briefcase or whatever, and like he took it when the mob thought that was the money that they needed. And
let me ask you something. What if Jay had always been considered the bad brother? And he was. He enjoyed being a bad brother.
You mean Ray?
Right.
Yeah.
But let's say that he had a moment when he did something that was very nice. Let's say, what was the other brother's name?
Jay.
The good brother.
Jay.
Jay. Okay, so Jay didn't get into school. So what Ray does is he's been skimming the money to pay for his brother's school.
yeah,
And he's told the brother, no, I got you got a scholarship. So what he's actually done is he's done something noble to help his brother. And yet Ray does not know that.
Yeah.
So when he comes back years later, at some point,
Yes, he has to tell him, and Jay has to be furious. You
Yeah.
mean I went to college on stolen money?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, or he has to say, I went
now
off
he's
and
involved.
I did. Now he's involved, but he's the guy who lives a very clean life, and morally this offends him. And
Yeah.
his brother Ray would say, you know, we got.
There's-
What does it matter? He said, these are bad guys. I took money from them, and for a good cause. He says, you don't understand.
I was actually thinking in a
My
different
hands
way.
are dirty.
I thought about that in a different way. Was when there was a moment where Jay turns to Ray, he's like, I made something of myself. I got that scholarship, and you had to be a bum. And he starts laughing. He's like, you really think you got that scholarship? He's like, I had to
Yeah, he
muscle my
pushed-
way to get you into school. I paid for your college with all that money that I stole. And then that's when he reveals that. He's like, you know why I was such a criminal? Is it because I knew that you were going to have a better life than me? I knew I was going to eventually go to jail.
I think that's a possibility, and I'd write it that way. But I'd also write it the way, you know. Let me just say something. As a producer type, as a development person, it really is very selfless. And Dan can. It's not you have to do my idea. So when I say my idea, it's my suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
The way I would see it, I would say I have a sense that the way I suggested it might work better. Because Ray is pushed to the edge. Jay pushes him to the edge where he says, you chose the criminal life. And it's almost like revenge because he's kept it a secret. He's kept this deep, dark secret. So that has to be the moment before they go on the show. I mean, that has to be the moment like at the end of the second act or into the third act where things start falling apart for them.
Yeah.
But I think either way, I think you would write, maybe perhaps, or not only that when you are writing a screenplay, your characters start talking to you, and they may tell you which way to go. We're talking about a concept and an idea here, but as a writer myself, that 50 pages in, the characters are already saying to me, no, go this way, because because they have a life of their own. Also, because you're accessing all parts of you, your subconscious, your unconscious, and all of that. So no amount of planning can prepare you for the unexpected, the wonderful unexpected. What I want to say about this pitch is that you have Dan and me. See, this is the sign of a good pitch. First of all, you told it well. You didn't take too long. You didn't give us too much detail. And you made us start seeing it. I could see these brothers. They have dark hair. I see them having dark hair. And you inspired us to ask questions, to make suggestions, to offer to you ideas. And so this is the mark of a really good pitch. It's unique, it's original, and I think it's an actor's dream. Don't tell me Nicolas Cage didn't have a ball making a fool of himself playing those two brothers in adaptation.
I bet he did.
Yeah, he had a blast. He had a blast.
Now, I have a question about pitching specifically. in the way that I pitched the ending of the story. Now, I always have this weird thing when I think of pitching, is that I always have the impression that I kind of maybe don't want to say the ending. I don't know what it is about that, because I feel like the point is to get you hooked. So you don't agree with that? You think
beginning, middle, end. We need to
beginning,
know.
middle, end.
We
Okay.
need to know the ending. Also, what if Ray gets caught? They stole the money or whatever. Why does Ray go back to jail? Why does he go back to jail? Did he break parole or something, or what did the police arrest him for?
Because the money was gone, and they knew that he had stolen it, because one of them had stolen it, and so he takes the blame, and he's like, I'm better off in jail than with the mob out trying to get me. And then they catch the mob too, and then there's a whole fiasco. And so
okay, here's the deal. They stole money that wasn't theirs, that belonged to the quiz show. How will the audience react when they do that and keep the money? I think maybe the money has to be given back.
No, they're going to try to give the money back, but because they had done such a good job, the
Yes,
quiz show
yes.
awards them the money.
Yes, because the mob coming in and the whole thing, the ratings
He
went
went
through
off
the
through the roof.
freaking
Yeah.
roof.
Yeah.
Yes, and so he doesn't go to jail, and he becomes Uncle Ray. He
could
becomes
work.
Uncle
He
Ray,
becomes the host of a TV show.
or he becomes the host of a TV show. Yeah, I think your ending may reveal itself, but you have a happy ending.
Yeah.
You do, but I think maybe we see him at the Magic Castle. Maybe he's a magician. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure, but it's got to be something that's in line with his character. He's no longer a criminal, but he's doing something where he makes use of his of his skills and talents. It's like in the Catch Me If You Can, the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio about he pretended he was an airline pilot and a doctor and all of this, is that the FBI, when he wound up working with the FBI on the check kiting, and phony check thing.
Yeah.
So there's maybe he works with law enforcement on something. I don't know. Or maybe he's his character may tell you how the ending is, but it is a happy ending.
Yeah.
Don't send him back to jail.
okay.
And that's my
Good point.
sense. Don't send him back to jail.
No, that's a very good point. I
I
agree.
like it that the producer calls him and he says you're hired, and maybe he does have America's Most Wanted, or he is the host of a TV show. That might be really, really interesting.
I like that. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, another thing that I want to ask about, from my perspective as a writer trying to pitch something, what would you suggest? What are some major do's and major don'ts for me as someone who's pitching something to producers or to some executives?
First of all, this is for you or anybody who goes to pitch. They called you in to pitch because they read something of yours and they think you're good. They think you're a good writer, and they want to form a relationship with you. Pitching is always an audition for a second meeting and for a relationship. So it's common courtesy. It's dress appropriately depending on the company. Business casual, you can never go wrong with business casual. If everybody's dressed in t-shirts and slacks or jeans, the next time you come you can be in a t-shirt and jeans. The first time business casual, you can never go wrong because it's right in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Be 10 minutes early, be nice to the assistant. Don't sit down immediately when you go in. They'll tell you where to sit because you might sit in the king's chair. I always tell people when they pitch, you're a writer, and most producers aren't writers, and there's always a little undercurrent of envy or jealousy. So you walk in with humility, in between super humility and arrogance. Like I always say, walk in like you have something they want and you know something they don't. So you're not super, super grateful, but you say thank you for your time, and you get to the point. I like it that you gave us a log line, because that's the concept, and we could see it right away. And that you pitch as briefly as possible, but filling in enough. And your time was right. It was maybe 3 or 4 minutes. Yeah, 5 minutes or under is really good. And then they'll say to you usually, what else you got? Because they will never say we want to buy this, but they may be very excited and take it to people. They may not be able to green light. So you just move on to the next thing. They will say, what else you got? So
Okay.
always have 2 other ideas
Okay.
that you really, really like. And then nothing may happen. But in a year, they may have a project where they read your original script, they heard your pitches, and they say, this guy could rewrite this. Or, we're going for comedies. Remember that guy who pitched the twin thing? Let's call Garen, right?
Okay.
Okay. So never look for a deal when you
Right.
go into pitch, ever.
Now, what are some major don'ts? Like that's something that I I remember whenever I first started learning what pitching was, that was something that terrified me, was saying the wrong thing or doing the
Too
wrong
much
thing.
detail. What happens is if you start going scene, and then the next scene, and the next scene, you're bogging everything down, right?
Right.
With too much detail. Yours flowed very nicely. You moved through it and didn't give us a scene by scene, overly detailed pitch. What about you, Dan?
I think first of all, what you do well is you know how to play yourself. You have this nice quality of being genuine, where I didn't get the impression that you'd memorized an entire pitch, and that if we dared say something in the middle of it, you would fall apart because your train of thought had been broken. It was very natural. What I also liked about it was that it wasn't perfect yet. But it had a lot of potential in it. And what you did is you conveyed to us why you wanted to do this. What was your reason? Because you like comedy and you like this other stuff. But you also gave us an enthusiasm that can't be faked. And a lot of times when I used to take meetings, you would see someone come in and you could almost see them saying, I'm going to do this because this is a movie that's making money. This is a genre that's making money. I hate this genre, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I didn't get that from what you were saying. What I would like you to maybe try to do more in another pitch is just make people aware without highlighting it, without making it too obvious, where you as a writer have something to bring that Hollywood needs. And what that is with you is the fact that even though you were born and raised in LA, you're still to a certain degree an insider who's an outsider. And part of that is your ethnicity, the fact that you're that you're ethnically Armenian, and that Hollywood doesn't really know how to deal with people who are Eastern European and have that Eastern European sensibility. And yet, where you have a card with that is, it's almost like when Roman Polanski was making the movie Rosemary's Baby. When he was doing Rosemary's Baby, he had never lived in New York City, and yet he captured that essence of New York. When you're writing this script, you are capturing the essence of quote-unquote white culture because you're on the outside looking at it, and you see what it takes to be an outsider to fit in, so that you don't get bashed, you don't get you don't stand out to where people notice you. So therefore, you know their behavior better than they do. You know their rituals, you know their jargon.
But you don't. I have to say, you wouldn't bring this up in a pitch.
No, you hint at it.
I don't know where it quite. I understand what you're saying. I really don't know where this fits in with his pitch, because he came and told us how much he loves comedy, and that he also likes the idea of a sibling relationship and the conflict there, and a crime and something to do with the mob. I understand what you're saying. However, I think as producers aren't even concerned with that.
They absolutely are, because what they're looking at is that, well, that's because you're a white chick. And whereas when I was an Asian, I played that card every day. And
I don't know. Well, how would he do it? How would he say, "Well, I'm Armenian, but you're also an
No,
American"?
no,
He may be
that's-
Armenian, but he's also an American,
Well,
and he's grown up in the
that's
system.
the point. It's that he goes is that in the middle of pitching it, you're let's say you're just talking about the brothers and you're talking about their relationship, and you go, okay, let me just tell you something honestly. I got a brother, and we're Armenian, so we do things a little bit differently, but I understand how this guy would do it and how he would be caught up in it. So you're just giving a little touch on the outside that all of a sudden you're piquing the person's interest. Like, oh, what other insights is this comedy going to have? Because you have that outsider sensibility.
I have to tell you that as a producer, I'm an equal opportunity listener. I don't really care who you are. If you've got a good story and you can write, I'm interested. And okay, so we're coming at it a little differently because I'm also a minority. I'm Jewish, of course, in Hollywood, not in Hollywood. But okay, there you go. So,
and you also have to, and to be honest, when you're addressing Hollywood and you're addressing the people that you're often addressing, you have to address the elephant in the room.
Okay, then here's the way I would handle that. Okay, we're going to have a little synthesis here. We have thesis, antithesis, a little synthesis. Okay, the way you play that is your second pitch is Armenian, is an Armenian family. First of all, because the Kardashians have made Armenians, blah blah blah, and then you've got the Shahs of whatever on the reality show about the Shahs of Sunset. So Armenians are now, and then Dr. Paul Nassif. Well, he's Lebanese, but the Armenians are now front and center, much more than they ever were. So you have a pitch about your, and it's something that you want to, don't just do it, play it smart. Have one of them be about our living in Glendale, for instance, or whatever. And because everybody knows Glendale, right? And all the Armenians there. I mean, like I go to an eye doctor in Glendale. All the doctors and everybody's name ends in IAN.
Yes.
So we all know about that. So I would use your culture, use your background, use your family. Mine it, cannibalize your own life, and come up. Your second pitch would be, you could say, well, what else you got, Garen? You could say, well, by my last name that I'm Armenian. He says, and I've got a story for you. And so have one, and have your third pitch be something else, But use it, and you don't have to be cynical about it. Mm-hmm. But because if I were to talk to you, with whatever my background, whatever my story is, whatever my issues are, I could have my second pitch be, well, I've always been fascinated by X, or in my life I've had this experience, and I have an idea. Do you understand what I'm saying? And
right.
People will be very drawn to that. So I think taking what Dan said and going back and forth, that to me would be the best way to do it. And then you could really go, excuse my language, balls to the wall with the whole Armenian experience and what it's like to be raised as an American boy, now young man, from with an Armenian culture. So you've got that mix. And what was it like with your parents, and when you liked certain things, and did you like some Caucasian girl, some white girl? I mean, all that whole experience, and mine it.
Yeah.
Because there's a million stories, And just like in My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which was very specifically Greek, but appealed to masses of people because it had a universal theme: family, weddings, the whole deal. So I think you've got like a lot of material there to let them know I have a special identity, and I have an insight, and I have a way of looking at things, But if you're not going to make these brothers Armenian, I would leave all that out of your pitch. That's my take on it.
Right.
I'm going to disagree. I'm going to say that you throw it in as a comment, because what you're doing is you're showing where you have a universal understanding, and how there's something that is universal about it.
But why would someone think, well, he's Armenian, he doesn't have universal understanding?
Because I've been in meetings where people looked at me and said, you can't possibly understand American culture because you're Asian.
Well, I think maybe being Asian and Armenian might be different.
Well, I mean, I would have to side with Dan on this because I've experienced that too. Not in a pitch meeting, but in similar ways of like. Okay. It's not about it's necessarily saying, like, especially in a place like when you here in LA when I say I'm Armenian, there's an image of what it means to be that. Mm-hmm. So to explain that to somebody, it's immediately going.
Just make it organic. Just make it organic. Don't make it contrived. Make it organic.
Well, when I was pitching for example, when I was pitching the Manson story and all that, they were looking at me like, "How do you know about the Manson murders?" And what I had to be was I had to go in there because this was CBS and they'd done Helter Skelter. Right. And we were doing Sexy Sadie, and I was going in there and I was telling them, and they were like, you could tell that they were right on the verge of saying, we never thought that an Asian would know this stuff, and it's not deliberate. It's not deliberate on the part of the person who's doing it.
I have to tell you then that I must be a better person than these people, because it would not occur to me, as long as you were speaking English and I could understand you, as long as you were speaking English like an American, I would never question. Because you have Japanese descent, that you wouldn't be interested. Just as when you talk about all the Manson stuff, I don't go, Dan, how come? I might be interested as a human being, saying what fascinates you, but it would never have anything to do with your ethnicity.
But see, here again is that and it's subtle in Hollywood. Is that you have to know how to play people so that they don't immediately dismiss you. In the same way that when you're doing a resume, I always had a fake white name, just in case I had to use it.
That's really
and,
interesting.
and it's because you will have people, when I was going for development jobs, there would be people who look at me and go, you can't possibly understand American
I hear you.
culture.
You will get a sense of the room.
Yeah.
You will get a sense of the room. It also depends also if you go into pitch, they will have read something you wrote, depending on what that is, because they'll know who you are. So take everything we've said under advisement, but I also think that you probably have an Armenian story that has universal appeal in you.
Here's the other reason. The other reason is marketing. Because as part of the marketing edge on this, what they'll do is they'll play up Garen's ethnicity. They'll
Yes.
play up the fact
Yes.
that, oh, this was someone who has an Armenian last name, but look at what he's doing. He really has this understanding of American culture, becomes part of the story
Yes.
of the movie. It's just like the guy who wrote Remains of the Day. The most ultimately British thing. He's a Japanese guy.
Yeah, right,
And,
absolutely.
and all of the Merchant Ivory movies were written by an Indian woman. So you sometimes have to take what people aren't willing to even acknowledge that they have it within them and make it fun.
Right. This is about branding yourself,
Yeah.
but not in an obvious
Yeah.
way. Because in the end, it's your talent and your ideas and your story. I really like that. And it's time for us to say, and we want you to participate too, of course, Garen,
All right.
into our second part of our podcast, which is talking about movies that were based on books, about the adaptation, and about how successful we felt they were. And was the book better than the movie? Was the movie better than the book? And the word better is kind of really subjective because they're two different mediums.
Yeah.
When you read it at your leisure, it can be 100 pages, it can be 500 pages, and movies are usually two to 2.5 hours. Dan, why don't you explain the Hitchcock and Selznick theories about adaptation?
Okay, Alfred Hitchcock and David Selznick kind of sum up the whole world of doing adaptations in Hollywood. David O. Selznick was someone who believed that, especially when you're dealing with something that was a success, your job as someone who's adapting it is to preserve as much as you possibly can. He used to say that an audience will forgive you for cutting something out, but they won't forgive you for replacing it with something that they don't like. So he was very big on being true to the text, and that was when he was doing David Copperfield and all of these famous novel adaptations. Then he got Gone with the Wind, and Gone with the Wind was a 1,037-page book, so they knew that it would have to be really compressed for a movie, and it was a difficult thing for him. And yet the movie was successful enough to where now, nearly 80 years later, it still more or less plays. It doesn't play as well as it did 10 years ago, but it still plays pretty well.
And it's pretty faithful to the
Yeah.
book.
It's very faithful to the book, especially in spirit, and that's the challenge. How do you keep
Absolutely.
it true in spirit? His very next film was Rebecca, and it was based on a Daphne du Maurier novel, and he brought Alfred Hitchcock over from England to do to direct the film. Hitchcock, on the boat over, took the book and made a joke out of it. He played all the little funny things. For example, the way that the two characters meet at the beginning is that this romantic but somewhat distant husband character makes his bride-to-be a little nauseous because he's smoking a big ugly cigar. And he created this crazy aunt who lives in the tower, making it even more like Jane Eyre than the book was to begin with. Selznick sees this, knowing that Rebecca is this huge hit, and absolutely shuts it down. And he and Hitchcock never really got along well after that, even though Hitchcock made him more money than any other filmmaker. And Hitchcock and Selznick made Hitchcock a star.
Okay, let me ask you a question, because I haven't seen the movie in a while. Is the movie faithful to the book?
Extraordinarily, except for the fact that they had a production code issue, and that was that in the book, clearly Maxim de Winter killed his wife. He confesses it, and under the Hays Code at that time, you could not have a husband get away with murder. Now, the way they got around that, and this was genius on Hitchcock's part, is as Laurence Olivier is discussing how Rebecca happened to lure him down to the boathouse and how they got into this big fight, and in the middle of this big fight she trips and falls and hits her head and dies. The way they shoot it gives you the hint he's lying. And what it did is it played that the heroine was so desperately in love with him, even though she's going to show her own strength, that there's an ambiguity there, that maybe she is staying with a murderer. This, on the other side of all of the abuse, the burning beds, the O.J. Simpson case, all this other stuff, today that movie feels distinctly uncomfortable because we do feel, oh, she's married to a murderer.
Absolutely. And speaking about big hit books, big popular books, where the adaptation worked because they took out what didn't work for the movie, The Godfather. In they pretty faithfully followed the book, and I like what you had to say about the audience will forgive removing things but not replacing it with something that doesn't work. They took out a whole section there. If you remember, Sonny, James Caan, was married with children, but he had a mistress that he met at his sister's wedding at the opening. Remember the big hats and the big pink dresses? That kind of blousy, dark-haired Italian girl that he would go visit while the others waited and have sex and then come. In the book, she's a minor character in the movie, right? Just to show Sonny's character and the chances he took and all of that. In the movie, in the book, she's a major character. She after his death, because she stayed his mistress, and there are scenes with them in the book. She moves to Las Vegas, and I will just be as delicate as possible, because Sonny's member was so large, it gave her problems there.
You do remember that when that movie was shown on TV, they kept in the shot of her
going like this.
Yeah,
she's sitting
and all of a sudden they got complaints from all sorts of things.
So you get a hint of that in the movie, but that's about it. And then you see one time when he visits her, and then you never see her again. In the book, she moves to Las Vegas. You know, Puzo in the book took the focus, and it worked in the book because it's a book.
Yeah.
And you had some interest in it because he made her likable, and she he filled her in and all that. But in the book, she moves to Vegas, and she has this problem. Sex is awful for her because she's cavernous, okay? And so she meets, but she's a girl from, she's this. She's just an ordinary Italian girl who had an affair with a mafia guy, right?
Yeah.
And she meets this Jewish plastic surgeon named Jules. I remember his first name. And no, you can't love me. And he falls in love with her and fixes her. And so we're happy for Lucy. That was her name. Her name was Lucy. They cut that out from the movie, rightfully so. And I think Puzo, the stories I heard about Puzo was he was given first shot at all the Godfather scripts. That was part of his contract, and he wasn't a screenwriter. So Coppola came in and he revised it. It was it was honoring and respecting Puzo. So he may have kept that in his draft, I don't know. But they took it out completely because they knew if they showed this, and this was not an 8-part miniseries, she had no role in the trajectory of the story.
I think that was like a really smart move. But the reason being, like you said, it works for a book, but the reason a whole thing a whole chunk like that doesn't work for a movie is because it takes away from a focused narrative. It takes the problem that I have with some films is it jumps back and forth and there's too many things.
Too much.
You ever had those moments where you go oh, this is way longer than it should be?
Oh God.
That's the problem.
Absolutely.
Is because when you're deviating away from more than 2 or 3 main people you should be following, it starts to get confusing.
And a minute of screen time is an eternity, and let's keep focused on you can have different stories going on.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about one of those Richard Curtis Love Actually. I'm talking about something like one of the most successful adaptations of a book is Sense and Sensibility, which is one of my favorite films. Emma Thompson adapted. She'd never written a screenplay, but she was listening and she was reading her scripts as an actress, and she won an Academy Award for best adaptation. Sense and Sensibility follows the Austen book to a T. It was brilliantly shot, brilliantly cast, brilliantly acted, and I think it caused it was the first book that Austen wrote, and it had her classic themes of loving someone who you think loves someone else, or have your eyes on the wrong person. Kate Winslet's in love with Willoughby, and she winds up with Alan Rickman, who's devoted to her, and Emma Thompson's character is in love with Hugh Grant and thinks he's marrying someone else, and she has that wonderful scene where she breaks down hysterical when she realizes he's not married and that they're going to get married. It's absolutely wonderful. Another one is Wuthering Heights with Olivier.
One? Yes.
It's the only one.
The book.
It did half the book, but it didn't matter.
Didn't matter.
It didn't matter. because
Well, it did matter to those of us who watched the movie instead of read the book for our English class in junior high.
Oh, there you go. Because this was one of Olivier's. This was in his breakout role, wasn't it?
It was.
His
And
breakout
Weiler
role.
had a tough time with him because he couldn't pull it down.
Yeah, yeah. He had a lot of. He played Heathcliff, and Merle Oberon, and her most beautiful played Kathy. That death scene is where he where he carries her to the window, and then at the end when you see their figures, going off. I mean, it's baloney. It's bullcrap romance.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the stuff that fills the heads of young girls, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Talk about the unworkable relationship.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely timeless. Absolutely, like Romeo and Juliet. They were 14, right? I mean, what did they know about love, really? But it's still a timeless theme. What about you? What's some of your favorite adaptations?
What I'm fascinated by is stage adaptations. For example, what they did with something like Streetcar Named Desire, or what they did with something like Long Day's Journey into Night. And my favorite is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, because Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, I don't know if it's to this day, but for decades, Edward Albee hated the movie. And that was because the movie did something the play didn't do. And it sexualized it. It made you understand why George and Martha were together. Because, of course, if you're
was
married to
Taylor-
Elizabeth
with
Taylor,
Taylor, yeah.
you're going to stay with her. And you understood why Nick actually was tempted by her, even though she's an older woman, supposedly. Whereas on the stage, when you had Uta Hagen
Yeah.
and Arthur Hiller and George Grizzard, you're like, oh no, this guy, if he's going to sleep with that old battle, no.
No, yeah.
It's like B. Arthur in Maud. If you were going to have John Ritter sleep with her in a cross show pollination,
Yeah,
it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
But they captured that, and then you look at something like Streetcar Named Desire, where it was a lot more stagey than Virginia Woolf, which is very cinematic, but it's a perfect version of the play. It captures all of the desperation that was going on between these characters, and got around the production code.
Who's the streetcar you're talking about?
The 1951 with Marlon Brando and Vin
Yes.
Dingley.
Now let's talk about the ending of that, because I'm a little confused. In the play, she lets him go, right?
No, in the play,
she takes him back.
in the play she takes him
In
back.
the movie, she lets him go.
In the movie, she goes running up the stairs, so it's ambiguous.
It's ambiguous, right?
And yet it's more satisfying from today's audiences, because today we're saying, yeah, she is drawn to him sexually, but she realizes he has crossed a line. He has cheated on her with her sister and sent her sister to an insane asylum. You do not forgive that.
But she's carrying his baby too, so that complicates things.
It complicates it, but
I want to talk about, because you mentioned Rosemary's Baby. I read Rosemary's Baby, and was sitting with my parents in the living room, and I was reading the book. I'm sitting in I think I may have mentioned sitting to my parents, and I'm reading the scene where her friend has died mysteriously, and he sends her the Scrabble set, and she puts the name together, and I got so frightened, and I feel that the book was better than the movie, and this is why. I know I'm going against what so many people believe. I think that Mia Farrow was miscast, because from the beginning she's a waif. She's a little waify thing. So the waif is the victim, almost from the beginning, even though from the beginning I'm a victim, or I'm a potential victim. In the book, Rosemary was this strong-minded Midwestern girl. I saw her as a young Kim Stanley, right, without all the neurosis, right? Strong. And so that when she becomes a victim, it's more meaningful. Also, I adore Ruth Gordon.
with Gordon, she won an Academy Award for that.
I know she did, and I think she overplayed it. I kind of think she overacted. She was too Ruth Gordon-y in it. The rest of it was terrific and very, very scary. Cassavetes was awesome. Cassavetes was perfect. But I have a problem when I watch it, and I look at her when she says to the baby, "Oh, little Andrew," or "little Molly," whatever. I go, "Oh, please." That was. I don't know why they cast. I know why they.
In my opinion, I think the reason her looking like a timid, not like in the way of the book, helped the scary aspect of the film, because the first time I ever watched that film, it was creepy as hell. The reason being is because when you see Mia Farrow's face and like just the way like she looked like a skeleton, like not like a skeleton, but like the idea that it upplays the idea of how helpless she is in this situation where she's just trying, oh, it's a good baby, you know what I mean? Like it made me kind of afraid of what was going on, because if it was like one of those, like, because the thing that I get bothered by when I watch a scary movie and there's like a badass character in there who doesn't die, or who's usually the one thing, it kind of made me feel like, well, I felt like I watched an action movie or I felt like I watched some kind of more adventurous movie, but with a strong lead. The reason that a scary movie becomes scarier and creepier is when you know that the main character can't do crap.
Well,
You know who the original casting was on that?
Who was it?
It was Robert Redford and Jane Fonda, and it was a follow-up because it was Paramount to
Barefoot in the Park. I think, in a way, with that blonde hair and that that kind of all boyish American, all American, it would have. Oh, Jane Fonda would have been perfect. I could see Jane Fonda, because as things start overwhelming her, because that's that's the thing. I read the book and saw the movie.
Right.
So, but if I hadn't read the book, it would be fine. Another book that Ira Levin wrote, who's a wonderful writer, A Kiss Before Dying.
Yes.
And when they made the Robert Wagner one, there are 3 murders. They took one out, and
Yes.
it made me
Pissed
so
me off.
It pissed me off so much. The book is brilliant. He's one of those writers. Also, what did you think of
Stepford Wives.
Stepford Wives.
Both of them are bad.
Bad, yeah, overwrought.
Especially the William Goldman one, where you have all of the women, instead of being these voluptuous creatures, they're walking around in muumuus.
Muumuus and parasols and frilly dresses.
I have no idea what a muumuu is.
It's
like
Hawaiian. Well, I used to wear, when I was very pregnant with my sons, a muumuu. It's just like
It's like a straight sheet.
straight sheet,
Oh, okay.
like Hawaiian. It's Hawaiian.
And
Okay, that makes sense.
it looks like they're walking around in their nightgowns. And
Oh, okay,
they're
I
walking
guess
around
I
in
picture
granny
it.
nightgowns. And also you have Catherine Ross in it, and I mean, time has been very kind to Catherine Ross, because you can watch her now in the same way.
Yes.
That it's very, very possible to watch every single Diane Cannon movie and just be fascinated by Diane Cannon.
Oh God, yes.
But Catherine Ross in that, she's so blank through the whole movie that at the end, when she's turned into an animatronic, is she not all that different?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, one of the things that was scary about that was when you didn't know, when they became animatronic, and she realizes her best friend,
Yes.
who was such an awesome, broad. That was the most scary thing, when she
Yeah.
realizes her best friend. Let's talk about another one. I think Atonement was as good as the book.
I'm so ashamed to say I haven't seen Atonement.
Have you seen Atonement?
Yes.
Yes, I loved Atonement. I thought they did an absolutely brilliant job at. It's a very layered, complex book with so many different themes about love and betrayal and misunderstanding, and I think they took their time and did. I don't remember who directed it, but they did a really, really brilliant job at it. What's another book adaptation?
What's an adaptation that you like?
It's funny to say that, because all the books that I actually liked growing up, I never really saw a good adaptation or any adaptation. The only one that I saw, the only one that I saw that I really enjoyed the first time I saw was To Kill a Mockingbird. But I read the book and I loved it, and then I watched the film and I loved it. But that was like one of those rare exceptions, because the only other book that I ever read that I liked a lot, that I thought that I still have a love-hate relationship with till this day, is Catcher in the Rye. That's never been made. And
he would not have, he would not.
yeah,
do
Jay
that.
Salinger would never let that happen.
And he was absolutely
My
correct.
my form of films that I like that are adaptations of not necessarily of novels or books, but a lot of comic books and a lot of graphic novels. One of my favorites is Watchmen. It was an Alan Moore comic or an Alan Moore graphic novel series about superheroes during a time where, in an alternate universe, when the bombs dropped in the 60s, and
Did they make it into a movie?
Yeah, they made it into a movie. It was directed
Was
by,
Liam Neeson in that?
no, it was I can remember his name.
Was the movie successful as far as you're concerned? I mean, in interpreting
It was the beginning. The first time I saw it, yes and no, I kind of felt shaky about it. When I saw the director's cut, it felt a little bit better to me.
I'm going to look at my list again, because I love to do my research. You talked about The Remains of the Day, which was a lovely movie. Do you think the book? Do you think some? You know, when we say better, they're different art forms.
They're totally different forms. I think.
Do you think it was successful?
I think it was much better than the book. Because
Yes.
the book.
Yes.
The book is one of those books that you have to be a complete Anglophile. You have to be obsessed with that kind of pre-World War II British gentry type story, and if you're not, it's meaningless in a big way.
Yes, and Hopkins and Emma Thompson. It was those quiet moments. I mean, he was so brilliant at portraying a withdrawn, repressed character, and her efforts to get close to him. I mean, it was heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. I want to talk about two books. One that where I liked the book better than the movie, both of them. One is a wonderful book by Alice Sebold called The Lovely Bones. It's a brilliant, brilliant book. And it's the story, I mean, it's the story of a young girl who on her way home, she crosses a field and she's raped and murdered. And it's about the grief it brings to her family, and about how they finally find the neighbor who did it. But she's in heaven. She's in heaven, and so she has a voice in this book, right? And it's about what happens to the family, her grief-stricken parents and brothers and sisters, and she's in heaven, and it's so beautifully written. And they cast Mark Wahlberg as the father. He was too young. They had this art direction that was about what heaven looked like.
Yeah,
They made so many wrong choices. Mia Wasikowska was excellent in it, and the book I saw it and I was so damn disappointed. And but they took a chance. You know, they took a chance. Another one where the movie is 100 times better. But this is the opposite. The movie is 100 times better than the book. Is The Bridges of Madison County. And anyone who's unfamiliar with it came out in the mid-90s, written by a guy who made the main character, who's a photographer, the Prince of Love, the perfect man, like a royal steed. I mean, it was hilarious. And he falls in love with this Italian immigrant woman who lives in the Midwest with her soldier husband she met during World War II, and their teenage kids, and they have a lot in common. They have this love affair, and then for 3 days, and then he's gone, blah, blah, blah. And what Clint Eastwood did, because Meryl Streep played the woman, and he gave the movie to her character. And he became an attractive, charismatic man, but we didn't have all these qualities, these other godly-like qualities. He had a brilliant score. And a lot of the movie is the two of them talking. And it's fascinating. It was a brilliant, brilliant movie. Took the crappy book and made it into a really... It's kind of a chick flick, but I think men can enjoy it because of his character. Maybe not. But
it is. It's enjoyable. The book really, it was one of those books.
It's hilarious.
That in the 90s, if you wanted to read it, you had to put another book jacket on top of it because it was too annoying to be seen in public with it.
And I knew too many silly women who said, "Oh, have you read it? He's such a wonderful character." And listen, we all love the Prince Charming guy, but this was absolutely, because the way he wrote about him was his rippled this and that. It was just ridiculous. And he was writing about himself. And what Eastwood did...
No, he was writing about what he wanted to be.
What he wanted to be. And what Eastwood very, very wisely did was he took the concept and he actually, because my friend was an editor on it, was a sound editor on it, and she said he did a brilliant thing. He gave the movie to Meryl Streep's character, basically, because we are focused on her. He supports her.
Now, something that I talked with Dan about a long time, and you told me this, and I thought it was a really funny thing, was that a lot of times good books usually are made into bad films, but bad books are usually made into good films.
Oh, absolutely.
And you gave me you gave me an example of the Harry Potter books, where the better the Harry Potter book was, the movie wasn't that great. And that's the major one I grew up with, was the Harry Potter books and the movies. So the first couple of books were really good books. They're insanely popular, huge. The movies were good kid movies. I remember them when I was younger and it was cool, but watching them now, I'm like, it wasn't. It was cool to watch. It was okay, I remember this thing as a kid. It wasn't until I saw The Goblet of Fire, which I think is the best film out of the entire series, because it was not only really, I think, and probably I'll get some hate for this from my friends who actually read all the books in detail. I think it's not only extremely accurate to the book, but it's also a really good movie. It's actually pretty engaging.
I think perhaps they were finding their way more, when they started making them. I think, and then there are the good books that make good movies. And I think for me, To Kill a Mockingbird is one of them. I think the Elmore Leonard books, Get Shorty, Jackie Brown, and Out of Sight. There were 3 terrific movies. One is a Tarantino movie.
Actually, I don't like Jackie Brown. I've never, I love Tarantino, but I never got into Jackie Brown. Every time I watch that movie,
it's such a scene-oriented movie.
And it was
Isn't it?
I have Jackie Brown should have been my favorite movie of that year, and I did not like it. And I love blaxploitation movies.
Yeah.
And
why didn't you like it?
It went on too long.
Yeah, it was a little.
It had 100-minute. It had a great 100-minute movie buried in something that was almost 3 hours.
Out of Sight was extremely successful. That was when Jennifer Lopez, before she became the diva, when she's a really good actress. She was wonderful in that role because she wasn't playing herself. And she didn't have that reputation to guard. And of course, it was Clooney at the beginning of his film career.
Yeah.
And it's really, really well written. Of course, then there's Get Shorty.
Yeah, Get Shorty.
Which is such a great movie. Elmore Leonard is a treasure trove for filmmakers. He's one of my favorite writers. Let me look at my list.
Actually, we are out of time.
We
for
are
this
out of
week.
time. Oh my God, the hour just flew by. What a wonderful time we had with you, Garen.
Yes.
You're a terrific guest. Thank you for coming on
Thank you very
and being
much for
brave
having me.
enough to pitch to us. Thank you. I know that's challenging.
Yeah.
And please
I'm
don't forget to like and subscribe to the Unscripted Podcast.
That's the Unscripted Podcast. Please like and subscribe. We are just one part of it. So investigate, like, and subscribe. And we will see you at next week for Dan and Saran Take on Hollywood. This is Saran Fox.
Dan Watanabe.
I'm Garen Tanelian.
We will see
Signing
you later.
off.